Hello, how are you today? It's great to have you here. Welcome. I want to start this video with a question. What is your relationship with exponential? This is a bit of a strange question, so let me explain a bit where I'm coming from. This is a word that we often connect to maths, to numbers, but do we actually connect it or do we associate it to our own lives? So do you connect the concept of exponential to the way you live your life? Probably, if you're going through a midlife crisis or through an identity crisis, the answer is no, because when we are in the worst of those stages of life, exponential feels like the last word that you would use to describe your situation, because disruption doesn't feel expansive, it feels narrow, it feels repetitive, it feels just confining, yes? What we're doing at those times, so during an identity crisis, during a midlife crisis, we tend to ask ourselves the same questions. We're repeating the same frustrations. And at those times, it feels that we are trapped in this suffocating linearity, which is the exact opposite of exponential, that we are kind of stuck in this flat line. But here's an encouraging thought, and this is coming from personal experience after being hit very hard by a midlife crisis, that the season that feels the most linear on the surface is often the season that carries the deepest potential for exponential underneath. So if you've never felt so far away from exponential as you are now, then maybe you've never been so close. So let me tell you why I've been thinking about this. I'm about to finish now in October a 1-year coaching program. This has been the most powerful investment that I think I've ever done on myself. But the interesting thing is that the first contact I had with the program leader, so with the person running the course, was back in 2021, where I came across a Facebook ad for her ebook. So the ebook was £5. I bought it, I read it, I liked it, and then nothing. So there was no further contact, no gradual customer journey where I moved through her funnel. And then 3 years later, so last autumn, I came across her program. And the program was £5,000. And I've never been so excited to drop that amount of money into something. But what I was thinking is that I went from £5 to £5,000, from a tiny step to a massive leap. And on paper, that doesn't look linear. It doesn't follow that step-by-step customer funnel, yes, that we talked about when we work in marketing. But it made complete sense to me because I wasn't on a linear path. I was onto an exponential one, which was the last stages of a midlife crisis. And when I thought about it, I realized that this is exactly what happens in the seasons of internal disruption. So many of us assume that change, decisions, movement, whether that's in business, in personal life, in personal development, or in how we navigate crisis, that this has to follow a predictable linear path so that we go from 1 to 2, from 2 to 3, from 3 to 4, small steps, small moves, steady increments, and neat little progressions. And by the way, I am a fan of small moves, small changes, because I know that when you're at the bottom of the bottom, all we can do is small, right? That's all we have energy for. And that's all the options we have sometimes. And that is fine, because when you feel that you have nothing left, then small feels huge. And also, when you are starting from zero, as it happens during a midlife crisis, an identity crisis, whether you're starting from zero in real life, outside, or when you're starting from zero internally, then small can be exponential just because the departure point is zero. So there's no bigger change than going from zero, from nothing, to something. But life isn't always about small. It isn't always about linear. It isn't always about going from A to B, from B to C, and so on. Especially not when you're going through massive internal disruption. Because at those times, sometimes, and actually often, that knot of very hard to define feelings that's stuck here, that is exponential trying to come out through you, saying maybe this time you go from A to M. You don't go from A to B and then from B to C. And this happens because, well, this is my theory, because there is a point when we convince ourselves that it's not the time for exponential anymore, kind of that past us, for whatever reason. And we kind of give up on this idea, consciously or not, but exponential doesn't give up on us. So after a while, the pressure of pure exponential potential starts building, and it kind of shakes foundations. And maybe as you're going through this midlife crisis, you feel this earthquake ripping through everything, because for exponential to come through, some things have to give in. So it creates cracks in your life. This is what we experience as a midlife crisis, as an identity crisis. And when the pressure of exponential potential reaches a certain point, that is the only option, to let it out. And when that happens, whatever move you make from the outside, it can look completely disproportional. That's why we often hear this stereotype, yes, of the crazy midlife crisis decision, that someone quits their long-term job overnight, or someone ends their marriage, or someone, I don't know, buys a motorbike, or someone moves halfway across to the world. So from the outside and to the outside, it looks impulsive, it looks reckless, absurd, crazy. But from the inside, it can make perfect sense, because what others see as crazy is just exponential. The thing is that they're looking at it from a linear point of view. And exponential is the only way that it can be at this point. So exponential doesn't just describe numbers on a graph, it describes the way that sometimes humans move and sometimes humans behave. Now, one important thing to know about this concept of exponential is that if that pressure is building in you, exponential will come into your life one way or another. So let's say, for example, that you're tolerating a misaligned relationship, and you're convincing yourself of all the reasons why it's still fine, but something in you says, this is really not for me. So you're forcing and dragging things and hoping that somehow it will improve in a linear way. So in other words, you're putting the brake on exponential. But then what can happen is that the other person, so your partner, that they end the relationship. And this has exponential consequences. It happened to me. Or another example, let's say you're tolerating a line of work which used to be fine, but something inside you now says, and it has been for a while, but you hope it will get better in a linear way. So maybe one client at a time, here and there, maybe. And then what can happen is that clients stop coming altogether, that work stops coming altogether. And this has exponential consequences. It happened to me. And this is precisely because disruption, so internal crisis, is there so that we stop and think, what is my relationship with exponential? And yes, even at this point in life, when you assumed that linear is the way. So in other words, the crisis is there to give you not just permission, but urgency to leap instead of just crawl. And when that comes, your job is not to tame exponential back into a linear narrative. The job is to allow some level of exponential into your life. But first, the job is to explore exponential a little bit more. So let's do that with a couple of questions. You know that I always want to leave you in these videos with something useful. So the first question is, in what area of your life have you assumed that things can only be linear? And the second question is there an opportunity for an exponential move or for an exponential decision within the next 7 days? So think about these questions. You can journal on them, or you can leave me a comment in the comment sections to see what came up for you. I believe that midlife, and especially if you're going through an identity crisis during this time, is not the time for linear moves. It's a season that is designed for the exponential, whatever that means for you. So if you've never felt so far away from exponential as you do now, then maybe you've never been so close. But here's the thing, that if you're not aware of the blind spots that are influencing your perception or your decisions as you move through crisis, then you could easily confuse an exponential move with a reckless one. Or you could talk yourself back into the false safety of linear progress. And that's exactly what I'm inviting you to avoid and to explore in my upcoming course, The Coded Keys to Self-Rescue. I've been working a lot on it, so very soon I will be able to share a sneak peek of that course. And inside this course, we dive into the blind spots that are directing your choices, but also blocking your choices, blocking your perception as you move through internal disruption, especially during a midlife crisis that comes with some identity changes. So we're looking at these blind spots that are active now and that maybe have been active for a very long time, including the ones that keep trying to force exponential back into something linear, predictable, and safe. So if you felt that pressure of exponential, but at the same time you feel that something is holding you back, I would love for you to join the course. The link to register your interest is in the description box. So just type your email address there and I will let you know when registration opens. And that's all I wanted to share for today. I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.